everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Best Practices in Education for Cancer Survivors. My name is Sheryl Ness, and I'm the Project Manager for Healthcare Professional Education at the GW Cancer Institute. Before we get started, I would like to take a few minutes to go over some housekeeping remarks. We ask that everyone keep their phones on mute to avoid any background noise and disruption during the program. Also, please note that today's program will be recorded. We will use the Q&A feature for this webinar. You will see the Q&A box at the bottom right hand of your screen. If at any time during the presentation you have a question, please type it in and we will address it during the Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. The questions are anonymous and I will repeat the question. We will take questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to write questions in the Q&A box as we go, and we will make sure to answer them during the time allotted. We will also use the chat box feature, which is on the top right side of your screen. You can use the chat box to interact with each other. Because we will be talking during the presentation, we probably won't be able to keep up with the chat. So if you want to ask a question, make sure to use the Q&A box on the bottom right-hand corner. As a note before we get started, we will send out a PDF of the slides and a link to the archived webinar to all of the webinar participants today. The recording will also be archived on our website along with any of our previous webinars. I'd like to take a quick moment to review today's agenda. I will provide a brief overview of the Center for the Advancement of Cancer Survivorship, Navigation, and Policy. Then we will move into a presentation. And I will wrap up the webinar with a participant Q&A. One more reminder, we will take a Q&A through the Q&A feature on the bottom of your right-hand screen. I wanted to provide a brief overview of the Center for the Advancement of Cancer Survivorship, Navigation, and Policy, which brings you to today's webinar. The Center for the Advancement of Cancer Survivorship, Navigation, and Policy, which we affectionately call CSNAP, was created in 2009 through a generous grant from the Pfizer Global Health Partnerships Program. The mission of the center is to advance cancer survivorship and patient navigation efforts locally and nationally through education and training, policy analysis, outreach, and research. The center offers survivorship and navigation resources that are available online at our website and through a monthly e-newsletter. Additional materials is sent through the CSNAP listserv to over 2,200 subscribers. We will write white papers, create case studies, and work cooperatively with other healthcare organizations to advance patient-centered care. We also share summaries of our meetings and roundtables we have hosted to catalyze patient navigation, cancer survivorship, and patient-centered care initiatives. Through CSNAP, we have offered several trainings. We were recently awarded funding from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention that will help us translate our existing in-person trainings to an online format to make them available at no charge for our participants. We will start with our executive training on navigation and survivorship, which is the nuts and bolts training for building and sustaining navigation and survivorship programs. We will also be developing a competency-based patient navigator training that will be available through the online academy. Today's webinar is part of the CSNAP monthly webinar series launched in April 2013. We feature a variety of topics related to navigation and survivorship based on feedback from healthcare professionals across the country. We also have several research initiatives that we provide updates on through CSNAP. You can find archived webinars on these results on our website along with the reports that accompany them. Our goal is to share the findings so that we can provide you with the information to help you provide patient-centered care. If there are any topics that you would like to know more about, please let us know. Our email is listed below on the screen at casnapsnp@gwu.edu. Here's some more information about the CSNAP resources. You can visit our website to see webinars and reports. We also encourage you to check out our free cancer survivorship e-learning series for primary care providers at the link on the screen. That's the Cancer Survivorship Center Education.org. We have had a lot of oncology professionals complete it and find it useful. We recently launched our new modules on health promotion and care coordination. Our next webinar will take place on June 18th from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and it will cover integrative patient navigation. Following this webinar, you will receive an email with the recording, the evaluation survey to provide feedback on today's webinars, and today's slides. Here are your speakers today. Liz Hatcher is a project manager for cancer survivorship at the GW Cancer Institute. Also presenting today is Sheryl Ness, educator for the Mayo Clinic Cancer Education Program and assistant professor of oncology at the Mayo Clinic College of Medicine. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to talk today about the results of 2 surveys we conducted around education for post-treatment cancer survivors. Here are our objectives for today. We'll review common concerns survivors have after treatment ends. We'll look at the responses from healthcare professionals and educators on how their cancer survivor education programs work. And we'll look at what cancer survivors said were their preferences for how post-treatment education programs should be run and what information they are looking for from a program. So to review the importance of addressing the needs of this population, there are nearly 14 million cancer survivors in the U.S. And this is as of January 2012, and it's estimated that as of 2022, there will be 18 million cancer survivors. So with advances in early diagnosis and treatment leading to this growing population, it's important that we are addressing the needs of survivors through clinical and educational programs. As you can see, there are many issues facing survivors as they complete treatment. The transition off of active treatment can be an overwhelming time, and these issues and others may cause high levels of distress for cancer survivors. The Livestrong survey of cancer survivors conducted in 2006 and again in 2010 confirms that survivors' needs are not being met. More than 3,000 survivors completed the survey in 2010, and an overwhelming number of these cancer survivors, about 98%, experienced continued physical, emotional, and practical concerns. Yet many did not receive help for their needs. As you can see, only 58% of those who had experienced at least one physical concern had received care. Only half of those who experienced emotional concerns received help, and only 20% of those with practical concerns received help. Interestingly, the receipt of care reported for physical, emotional, or practical concerns actually decreased between the 2006 and 2010 surveys. So this is an ongoing issue where we need to improve. We know that education programs are just one way to meet survivors' needs, but they can be an important intervention in preparing survivors for what to expect after treatment ends and empowering them to make sure that their concerns are being addressed. We at GW have tried different approaches to educating survivors, and we've truly valued the insight we've received from other organizations as we've built our own programs. But still, we don't feel we have all the answers. So we launched these surveys to answer the question, how can cancer survivor education programs best meet survivors' needs and help improve the quality of care delivered and the quality of life for survivors? To answer this question, we wanted to know what other institutions were doing to educate survivors, and we wanted to hear from survivors themselves about their preferences. The first survey was a 23-item web-based survey. This was sent to healthcare professionals who have developed or facilitated cancer survivor education programs. We used a convenient sample and snowball method to reach these programs. Participants were also given the option to identify themselves for a follow-up semi-structured interview to gain more insight into their education programs, structure, content, and delivery. We had 29 respondents and 6 individuals completed follow-up interviews. The second survey was sent to survivors, individuals who had received a diagnosis of cancer and identified that they had completed active cancer treatment, which we defined as surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation, were eligible to take the survey. The survey asked survivors to indicate if they had attended a survivor education program, and the questions branched off from there. Those who attended a program were asked about their experiences with the program as well as their preferences. Those who had never attended a post-treatment education program were asked to share their preferences for such a program. 103 individuals completed this survey, which was promoted through support groups, local contacts, social media, and the CA-SNAP listserv. With limited respondents to these surveys, I just want to emphasize that we see these results as just a start to answering our question about how we can best meet survivors' needs and what are the best practices for these post-treatment education programs. As I'll discuss at the end, I think this information really gives us some exciting ideas for future projects and exploration of these issues.
So we'll first look at the results from the education providers. Most programs were open to survivors of any type of cancer. Looking at how the program was structured, the top 3 choices are here. Many programs were one-to-one education visits, many had a group class with a single session, and others had a group class with multiple sessions. This question allowed providers to select more than one method, since we know that education programs can happen in multiple ways at institutions, which is why the percentage here is greater than 100. Most classes were 1 to 2 hours long and were held on weekday evenings. There was no clear majority in how often programs were held. The results were split between always available, as in one-to-one or online programs, weekly and quarterly. But many respondents noted that this varied by the particular program offering. Generally, programs were either small with less than 5 attendees or larger with 21 or more attendees per session. We also asked if an online program would be as beneficial as an inpatient program. 55% thought that it would. Some reasons why that were given included allowing access to the program for more individuals, but those who said that they were not in favor of an online program were concerned about lack of internet access and lack of peer support. So let's look at what's included in the programs. First, we asked about the development of the program. Most programs were not based on an existing program or template created by another organization, such as a cancer transitions program. So most programs were a homegrown program. As you can see, the programs included a variety of topics. Nutritional information was the most common, followed by psychological support, adjusting to the new normal after treatment, physical activity, fear of recurrence, uncertainty, strategies for emotional coping, etc. As you can see, many programs address multiple topics. Topics that were not as common to address that we asked about included goal setting and survivor skills. We wanted to know when our survivors referred to these programs. As you can see, within the first 6 months after treatment completion was the most common. Also, most respondents said patients were referred to the programs by either the oncologist, a nurse, or they found out about the program themselves. Are providers measuring the impact of these programs? 80% of our respondents said that they are evaluating the effectiveness of their program. Generally, they were using pre- and post-tests to look at knowledge change and assessing satisfaction with the program. It was great to get some qualitative feedback from respondents as well between the survey and the follow-up interviews. Providers cited challenges to program success, including getting the word out about the programs and even just letting survivors know that this is information that they may need. Lack of referrals, location, and time commitment of programs were also challenges. And many respondents felt that survivors who have completed treatment may have moved on and not want another reminder of their cancer experience. Our respondents also had great tips for program success, and we wanted to share some of these. These included working as a team with the clinical staff so that everyone is invested in the program, providing opportunities for survivors to support each other, getting those referrals from providers, serving refreshments, and keeping the classes really positive and supportive. This wraps up a review of our survey of the education providers, and I'm excited that we'll have a chance to hear more about a successful program from Sheryl Ness at the Mayo Clinic after we review the survivors survey data. So as I mentioned, we had 103 individuals complete the entire survey. As you can see, the majority were between 41 and 16 years old, female, and non-Hispanic white. And I just want to acknowledge that the lack of diversity in respondents may limit the generalizability of our survey results. Again, this shows that there is a great opportunity for future research in this area. Most of our respondents identified as being breast cancer survivors, and there was a range on time since diagnosis, but a slight majority were 1 to 3 years from diagnosis. Only 6% were 1 year or less from diagnosis. We had respondents from 34 states and Puerto Rico, and the most from any one state was 17% from Washington, D.C. We had 46% say that they had attended a cancer survivor education program, which we defined as a class, workshop, online program, or one-on-one education visit that was intended to help the survivor after active treatment ended. For those that did not attend a program, a third set of program was offered. 37% said the program was not offered to them, and 30% weren't sure if they were offered such a program. So for those who did not attend a program, we asked, do you think a cancer survivor education program would have been helpful to you as you were ending treatment? As you can see, an overwhelming majority said that they felt it would have been helpful. This really highlights the need to have these programs and make sure that survivors are aware of them. Then we asked those who had not attended a program if this would still be relevant and useful for them today. As you can see, most said that it would be somewhat important for them to attend such a program today, which I think is interesting. Survivors may have eventually found the information they needed, but even with some time having passed since treatment, they would still be interested in attending a survivor education program. Similarly to the provider survey, we asked survivors questions about program structure, timing, and content. We asked, would you use an online cancer survivor education program, such as online videos, presentations, chat rooms, or discussion boards? As you can see, the majority would use an online program, and there was not much variation between those who attended a class versus those who did not in their preference. We also asked for the preferred location for a cancer survivor education class. This represents combined results from both those who had attended a class and those who did not. We asked both about their preference. The majority preferred classes in the cancer center, although quite a few indicated that a community location would be preferred. So let's look at the preferred time of survivor education programs. Again, these results and all the remaining results, unless indicated, are combined results for those who had attended a program and those who had not. The majority preferred after 5 p.m. on weekdays, generally Monday through Thursday, and 12 to 5 p.m. for an event if it was held on the weekends. So the majority of our survey participants indicated that they prefer 2 to 10 survivors in class meetings. We also asked about preference for program delivery, and the majority indicated that an in-person class with 2 to 6 sessions was preferred. Interestingly, only 9% indicated that they prefer a one-to-one meeting with an educator. We also asked about barriers to attending a survivor education program. As you can see, location was cited as the most important barrier. Again, this points to the potential of using online or teleconference options for education. We also asked about the value of having another survivor co-facilitate the program, along with the professional educator, such as the nurse or social worker. For survivors who attended education classes, 40% reported that they did have a survivor facilitator for their class. And we asked both groups how important they thought having a survivor facilitator would be, and they indicated that this would be very important. 51% of survivors overall indicated that talking to other survivor peers within the education class was very important to them. We asked those who did attend a program if it was targeted only towards survivors with their cancer type, and 54% said yes. Of those who said yes, 42% felt that this was very important to be in a program directed specifically towards people with their specific cancer type. For those who had not attended a program, 47% indicated a high preference for attending a program tailored to their specific cancer diagnosis. So for content, what are survivors looking to learn about and discuss in these post-treatment education programs? We've separated the responses of those who attended a class in blue to those who did not in red, but the graph in general is organized by greatest preference overall to least. And again, respondents could pick as many topics as they wanted to. As you can see, information on physical effects of treatments, adjusting to the new normal, risk for secondary cancers, and coping with the emotional impact of cancer were the most commonly indicated topics. followed by physical activity and nutrition, improving sleep, and stress reduction. As you can see, survivors found out about the programs they attended in varied ways. Interestingly, as we discussed in the tips from the educators, oncologist referrals may be an important factor in program attendance, but just 2% of our respondents heard about the program that they attended from their oncologist. We asked about the timing of attendance at programs, and we found that a majority of survivors who had attended a program did so a month or more after treatment ended. We also went a little beyond the questions specifically on education programs and took the opportunity to ask survivors about whether or not they received a survivorship care plan, which includes a treatment summary and follow-up plan of care. As you can see, the vast majority did not receive one. This represents both those who did attend a class and those who did not, and there was not a significant difference between those groups. Most from either group had not received a survivorship care plan. We also asked about where else survivors looked to for education and wanted to see if there were any differences in information seeking between those who didn't attend a class and those who did. As you can see, people who attended a class were more likely to seek out other survivors for information, indicating a preference for peer support. We also asked survivors for their additional comments to get some qualitative data as well for the survivor survey. And survivors called for more advocates to help with education throughout treatment and beyond. They wanted support groups for peer support, including groups specifically for young survivors. They called for greater ease in finding survivor education programs, and I thought this was really great feedback. They called for a shift in the conversation from talking about cancer to learning about how to deal with these survivorship issues. So in summary, what are the recommendations that we can learn from our survey results? As you've seen, survivors in our particular study preferred an online class or an in-person class, but nearly 2/3 would use an online program. They preferred a class that had multiple sessions, 2 to 6 sessions, with other survivors attending the meetings, 2 to 10 per meeting. And they indicated a preference for having a survivor co-facilitator. So we learned quite a lot from the results of these surveys. However, as I mentioned, this also sparked for us the need for additional research and more questions to ask. Given the lack of diversity in our respondents, we see a need to partner with other organizations to reach a more diverse population and also to get the survey out to more people through a more targeted approach. We've also thought about future surveys, possibly including caregivers and those still in treatment, since they were disqualified from completing our survey. We could also explore more about the preferred content for cancer survivor education programs and what content is best suited for an education class versus education provided as part of the clinical visit. And for education providers, we'd also like to look at sharing ways to measure the effectiveness of these programs and sharing tools and resources between the programs. I'd just like to briefly mention our program here at GW, that is our Cancer Survivor Education class called Next Steps to Wellness. It evolved from existing programs and contributions from other people at different institutions who were running these kind of post-treatment education programs. And it's evolved over time. It started as a multiple session class and is now one comprehensive class that's about an hour and a half to 2 hours, usually on a weekday evening. And we're looking to revise this program based on some of the survey results and just seeing what really works for survivors in our area to get them in to attend this class. And after I close out here, you'll hear about a best practice program from Mayo called Moving Forward After Cancer Treatment. So I just want to acknowledge Shannon and Hira for their assistance with the survey administration and this presentation, and also the funding that was provided by Susan G. Komen. And here's my contact information. Feel free to ask any questions as we go through the rest of this presentation. We'll take them at the end. But also, if you think of anything after the presentation that you'd like to learn more about or discuss, feel free to give me a call or send me an email. I'm always happy to hear your thoughts. So thank you very much. And I'm just going to introduce our next speaker, Sheryl Ness. She is an educator for the Mayo Clinic Cancer Education Program. In her role as educator, she helps inform and educate patients, families, and caregivers about the services and resources to help them through the cancer journey. Ms. Ness holds a master's degree in nursing from Augsburg College. In addition, she is an assistant professor of oncology at the College of Medicine, Mayo Clinic, and is certified as a specialist in oncology nursing. She writes weekly blog articles for the Living with Cancer blog on mayoclinic.org and serves as a social media resource for the Mayo Clinic Cancer Center. Sheryl is an associate editor for the Journal of Cancer Education. She has a strong interest in the topics of health literacy, social media and healthcare, cancer survivorship, and quality of life concerns for patients living with cancer. I'd like to welcome Sheryl Ness. We're just having a slight hiccup connecting to Cheryl's audio. Will just be just a minute. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is Sheryl Ness from Mayo Clinic. Thanks again so much for this invitation, and what a great discussion about survivorship. This, for me, I was an early adapter many years ago to developing cancer survivorship care plans for people through our state organization, which really sparked my interest in survivorship. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the services, programs, and different ways that we support cancer survivors at Mayo Clinic. We're going to talk a little bit about the care plan idea, which was interesting to see the results of the survey, how we're really lacking in that, and our practice is really no different. And looking at where those survivorship clinics are being held here in our practice and the momentum behind that. And then also talk a little bit more about the classes and resources that we have currently supporting cancer survivors as treatment ends. And so it's really exciting for me to be here and team up with Elizabeth and the team from George Washington Cancer Institute. Thank you so much. So if we talk a little bit about the perspective from the practice, just to give you an idea of what's happening here at Mayo Clinic, we have had some really good momentum in the past couple of years regarding survivorship clinics and providing specific care plans. Again, this was not the case probably 8 or 10 years ago. It was a dream, and so it's really, really nice to see that the champions in practice are really taking interest in this, and the traction has really, really gotten a momentum here. And you can see on the slide that specifically right now at Mayo, the breast cancer, lymphoma, GYN cancers, a new program for head and neck cancers, and then our transplant program have specific survivorship clinics. And through those clinics, they have access to nurse practitioners, a team of physician, nurse practitioner, and other healthcare providers who really look at their survivorship care plan from a comprehensive point of view. This it has not been easy at Mayo Clinic. It's a large institution. We also have centers in Jacksonville, Florida, and Phoenix, Arizona, where progress is also happening. So the next steps for us really are to make this available to all cancer patients and to really set expectations and guidelines in our practice for providing cancer survivorship care plans. So we are, at the moment, developing guidelines for that and have a template development in process. And some of our early cancer survivor clinics through breast cancer and lymphoma, which were the first two groups who actually implemented that, have helped us really kind of fine-tune that for patients. So if you're wondering what's included in the specific care plan that we offer here at Mayo, it is really focused on the diagnosis, treatment summary, and all of the different members of the care team, ongoing concerns specific to that patient, and any symptoms to watch from a short-term and long-term complication point of view. And then those late effects that could happen years later. And then the recommendations for follow-up care and tests. And what I really love about working at Mayo is the comprehensive referrals that do happen, referrals to, for example, our therapists, physical therapists, our psychologists, reproductive endocrinology, and a pretty active complementary and integrative medicine team, including wellness coaching, acupuncture, women's health clinic, and also to our educational resources, our survivorship class, the Moving Forward After Cancer Treatment, stress and resiliency training, which is also new within the last couple of years, and then a high focus on dealing with fatigue. Some of the wellness recommendations that are built into the care plan include diet, exercise, weight, and then alcohol and tobacco use. Some of those risk factors and modifiable behavioral lifestyle changes that we do know about. So next I'll transition into what Elizabeth mentioned. One of the things that I do directly is work as an educator, working with our Moving Forward After Cancer Treatment class. Now this class was introduced 2 years ago as a result of our own cancer survivorship survey, where we really identified that patients did need support as cancer treatment was completed. And so the patients who attend this class are typically just finished with treatment. Many times patients do come as they're completing treatment, so maybe radiation is completing within a 1 or 2 week period, so they're trying to prepare for that, which I think is fantastic. We also have patients who are long-term survivors who haven't had a chance to be enrolled in a program like this and would like to. So the main objectives for this class are to really promote that healthy lifestyle as treatment ends. And there's a heavy focus on managing the emotions of after cancer treatment's over, that anxiety and fear of recurrence, which we know is present. And then we talk a lot about late and long-term effects. But as Elizabeth mentioned in the survey, many times we do spend time talking about the current side effects that they're having from their treatment and how to deal with that. But we really want to teach them how to be an active participant in care. So it's meant to introduce that period of survivorship where they really don't know what to expect. We want them to be comfortable and kind of anticipate some of those things that may happen emotionally and physically. And again, our class is a 1-hour class, just to kind of give you an idea of the format, which we know is not long enough. We would love to have a longer class to hit more in detail some of these topics. We do hold the class on Wednesdays during the day when our center is open. But I'll tell you about a program in the evening that has gained some additional momentum and may help us really kind of decide what to do next with our class. So we typically get a group of between 3 to 5 patients, and very supportive as the conversation unfolds during that class, and I think it's really important to have that peer support. At the moment, the class is taught by an educator who is a nurse, and so for me it was really interesting to see the results of the survey where patients really wanted to hear from their peers. So it makes me think, how can we introduce more peer support and maybe peer training and facilitating of a course like this? I think that would be really important for next steps. One of the additional classes that we just implemented in the last couple of months is specifically focused on the management of cancer-related fatigue. So this is a group class that it's held once a week, and it is in the evening. It starts at 4 p.m. and it goes until 5:30. This is held at our local Hope Lodge, which we have found is a really, really great audience that patients and their family members are there. They have time in the evening, and so the attendance at this has been fantastic. We've had 8 to 10 people attend every week. We are currently piloting this, and so we have really tailored it to focus on 4 different topic areas, specifically focused on how to kind of work with that fatigue as a main issue. But we talk about fitness and exercise, and this particular session is actually facilitated by an exercise specialist, and she gives them really practical tools and ideas on how to deal with introducing exercise if they haven't, and how that can really be not such a dubious thing to do, because I think it can be overwhelming for them to think about, for patients to think about introducing exercise when their main side effect is being tired. We also talk about nutrition and weight management, how to really incorporate some of those lifestyle changes and wellness perspective. We spend the next session talking about relaxation and stress management. And then finally, at the end, we talk about sleep, the importance of sleep, and how that feeds into fatigue and really overall recovery, and as well talking about time management as they transition back into sort of the reality after cancer treatment is over. Interesting to see also the momentum around this. We just got funding from our cancer center and our clinical practice to work with the Livestrong exercise program at our local Y. So if it'd be interesting to hear if anyone else has had experience working with that program, because we will be implementing that shortly. Liz also mentioned how we can hopefully support our patients and families through virtual support. And for the last 4 years, we have had much success with our Living with Cancer e-newsletter and blog, which is one of my main responsibilities. I write a blog weekly, and that is usually the lead article for the newsletter that comes to the inbox of patients and family members who sign up to be subscribers. You can find the blog at mayoclinic.org, Living with Cancer. As I mentioned, I try to talk about something new every week. Various topics that have been really popular, of course, are those symptom management topics, like how do I deal with peripheral neuropathy? What about sleep? How about fatigue? Sexual side effects, dealing with survivor guilt. Those kind of topics have been really, really interesting. And I found that people really do find support virtually through talking with each other, which was sort of a surprise to me. I wasn't sure how this would go. But we currently have over 40,000 subscribers to the newsletter, and 4 years of blog discussions that are still active. So there are over 300 different topics out there. More recently, we've tried to get even more interactive on our Connect site, which allows individual users to actually create their own account so they can actually share more detailed information with each other as they're talking about different topics. And we are just this month piloting a specific subgroup within the cancer group for brain tumor cancer survivors. And so many times we hear people say, I really want to connect with someone who's had my exact experience. And I think we heard that loud and clear also from the survey results. So doing that from a very personal perspective is not easy. So maybe there's a way we can do that virtually if we're not able to provide that in person through our group sessions. So it's really been a pleasure to talk about what we're doing at Mayo Clinic Cancer Center. It's an exciting time. As I mentioned, 8 or 10 years ago, we were just happy to have a state cancer survivorship care plan implemented, but many of our programs were very, very much at their infancy. So I am excited about the results of this survey and the momentum that's happening right now. And I'd love to hear from all of you if you want to email me, if you have questions about what I talked about today or want to share your experiences. I'd love to hear from you. So I'm going to turn it back to Elizabeth and the team and see what kind of questions you might have for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sheryl. We now have a few minutes for question and answers. So as a reminder, you can use the Q&A box on the lower right side of your screen to submit a question. And while we're waiting, I wanted to mention again that we will be sending out an archived recording of the webinar today, along with the slides and a brief evaluation after the meeting. So feel free to use that Q&A box now.
All right, looks like we have a question coming in asking about if we'd be willing to share the curricula for any of the programs, the Next Steps to Wellness or any of the materials from the Mayo Clinic program. And I can just share for our Next Steps to Wellness program, we were really grateful, like I said, to have the support of other educators who shared their resources with us. So we're always happy and willing to send you our information as well. We had, our program was based on a program called The New Norm, which was developed at the Providence Cancer Center in Oregon. And we, myself and a social worker here at GW, adapted the program and adapted some of the sessions and delivered the program together. And it's really evolved, in each session is a little bit different. We focus on different topics based on the preferences and questions that are coming in from the attendees. But in general, we cover the common late and long-term effects of cancer treatment, usually a focus on fatigue, cognitive deficits, lymphedema, if that's relevant, or neuropathy. We talk about the emotional aspects of adjusting to life after cancer. We talk about relationship changes and, sort of feeling guilty that they can't get back in their old role performance. We talk about practical concerns with financial, employment, insurance concerns, and then we close out with some goal setting for patients to help them, participants to help them look ahead and think about what they want to focus on in this post-treatment period. So I'm happy to send that. It's a PowerPoint slide deck. We're looking to adapt it. We're working with a company to adapt it to make it a more interactive kind of online presentation that anybody could use anywhere. But I know also it's helpful to adapt it to your own patient population. So if anyone's interested in that, feel free to email me.
I think that's wonderful. I really, I agree with you that I would love to share also what we're doing. And it sounds like the structure is very similar. We did some kind of benchmarking before we piloted our moving forward after cancer treatment class as well. And I do have an educator guide along with patient education sort of guide that we give patients as we work with them in the class. So I'm happy to share that with the group as well. I really liked your point, though, about, how do you make this practical for the patient? And I think that we too end up, really kind of the direction of the conversations during each class is different depending on who's participating. And so being able to anticipate that and be ready to just, kind of go there if you need to. You don't always hit every topic that you want to talk about, but at least you talked about what was important to those patients. And so I think that's probably one of the things to remember if you're just getting started designing a program, is that each class will probably be a little bit different, but to have the tools and resources available for some of those really common things that come up are really important. I love the idea of setting goals at the end. I think I'm definitely going to bring that back to our practice here, because that gives the patient something active to work on and to think about for their own personal point of view as they leave the session. I really like that.
Great, thank you. And thank you for being so willing to share your resources as well. And we had another question just asking about how we promote these education programs and how we reach survivors. I think that was definitely something that came up in the survey results of, kind of getting those referrals is so critical. So Sheryl, do you want to just talk a little bit about how you get the word out about your programs and what's been effective for you?
Yeah, that's always one of our biggest challenges, and I know everyone struggles with this. What we have found here that works really best is a direct referral from our survivorship clinics. And so these are patients who are already talking about survivorship with their oncologist, and it's a perfect match. And that is when we actually see those patients coming down and saying, I was told I need to attend this class, that this was really important for me. So we know it works. Sometimes they forget, but we try to really keep an active presence with those survivorship clinic champions and the team members that work with those patients, so that we're kind of high on their radar. They remember that this is something that can really be complementary to what they're doing within the survivorship clinic. Also, just on our patient newsletters, we're always promoting it within our calendar of events. And we know that our patient population is transient. So at Mayo, sometimes they come for a second opinion, they come for treatment, then they go home. And so we aren't always able to see them in person when they're here. And so we are also looking at how can we provide more support virtually in the same idea that you're thinking of, making it more available either through a web-based tool or somehow being able to support them from where they are back home.
That's great. Yeah, and I mean, I think we try to do a lot of what you've said as well. I think, really getting that referral from the provider is so critical for getting somebody to really value this. And, I mean, obviously survivors who've completed treatment are really busy. They're getting back to their lives, and so sort of making this time for the survivor education class can be a challenge. So it really has to be something that they know is going to be valuable to them. And for our program too, it's a little different, as we're in DC, so there's multiple cancer centers right in our immediate area, which is great. And we try to get the word out about our programs through a local network of patient navigators, because I mean, obviously anybody from who's been treated at any cancer institute or cancer center here is welcome to come to our program. So we try to get the word out to reach people that weren't necessarily treated at GW or didn't get all their treatment at GW, but are certainly welcome to come to these programs. So we try to use some of those local contacts as well. Doesn't look like we've had any other questions. As Shira said, you can feel free to write anything in the Q&A box right at the bottom if you have anything else. And obviously you have our contact information for after the presentation if you think of something that you didn't have a chance to ask here. We'll just wait a couple minutes to see if any questions come in. All right, it looks like we've answered your questions, but again, if you think of anything else, feel free to contact us. And I just want to really thank you, Sheryl, for participating. I think you gave a lot of really great insight into your programs and probably sparked a lot of ideas for everybody.
Thank you for the invitation. Again, this is just one way where we can really work together and collaborate as much as possible. As working with survivors is something that is so important to do, but also it's not easy to find just the right program for the right person and meet everyone's needs. So I think the more we can share best practices and collaborate, the more we will learn about what we should do next, and how how to really meet their needs. It's so important. So I can't wait to hear more about this through your program. Also, our Navigator program here is through the American Cancer Society, so we work very closely with them. But we're excited that we just hired in our breast clinic in Jacksonville our first nurse navigator. So I think that the Navigator programs will also really feed into what we offer with our survivorship and clinics and support here in our practice. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sheryl. And again, these are our CSNAP resources. Please be sure to check them out if you have the chance. And also a friendly reminder that our next webinar will take place on June 18th from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and it will cover the integrative patient navigation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.